A very good evening to you. I'm Lisa Lord, and my special guest is the Chief of Staff of the Barbados Defence Force, Commodore Errington Shurland. Sir, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Lisa. Good evening to everyone.
You're most welcome. Now, I want us to start by looking at the various units of the Barbados Defence Force, starting with the Barbados Cadet Corps, which is where many young people start to have an interest in the military and its role in youth development.
The youth are our future. And to the extent that the Barbados Cadet Corps has been around for several years, I think what we have now to do is to revitalize the interests of the youth in the Cadet Corps as an extracurricular activity. Yes, the foundation skills of discipline and confidence and leadership, those are good, but I think we now need to get the young people interested in some other things. What about robotics? What about coding? What about exposing them to the medical field? Yes, they do first aid, but we can have a greater exposure to other opportunities within cadetting and perhaps shape them for things to come. So perhaps future doctors, future nurses, future chefs. So my thinking, my strategy really is to build out the Cadet Corps and to get them exposed to some other opportunities that can perhaps make them more productive citizens, but perhaps guide them more along a career path. The Prime Minister has given some indication to expanding the Cadet Corps, which I think is good. But that is one component of the cadets. I think we can expand the cadets and revitalize that interest, because I think some of the interest has been lost. COVID, of course, would have had an impact on cadetting, because it's more of a face-to-face type training activity. We've been able to use social media as well as the internet for some of that training. But that's not going to capture the essence of the face-to-face training. So for example, the drill, the skill at arms, that type of training is more hands-on. So I'm very happy that the protocols have been relaxed a bit. We are getting back to some face-to-face training. I came through here, our headquarters, on Saturday and saw the cadet band, the band's people out there doing their thing. So we're looking at starting back recruiting face-to-face. We're looking at starting back the various levels of training face-to-face, and I'm very confident in collaboration with the Commandant and his officers that we can build out the Cadet Corps to get the interest back up, but more so to get them involved in some other things to make them more rounded and productive citizens of Barbados.
Now you're talking about youth development. What's happening with the BDF sports program? Well,
the sports program is dear to my heart. I think if you look at the history of the sports program and some of the young men and young women that have come through the various disciplines in the sports program, I think it would be a tremendous loss not to maintain the sports program as value added to youth development in Barbados. Currently we're in discussions with the Barbados Football Association as well as the Barbados Cricket Association. Those were the two primary sports. We still maintain the boxing program. And we have to have some discussion as well with the Amateur Athletic Association. Those are the four primary sports that we've had in the sports program over the years. The discussions with the Barbados Football Association are at a fairly advanced stage. I think it is safe to say that we are close to having football back in the sports program in the Barbados Defence Tour. We are still in discussion with the Barbados Cricket Association. In fact, I have to have a meeting fairly shortly with the Minister of Sports, because I think the value added that the sports program can bring to young people in Barbados is something that we should not lose. We just have to look at Tino Bess and Miguel Cummins, who's still playing cricket for Barbados. Tevin Walcott. In terms of cricket, the footballers are too numerous to mention, that have not only benefited in terms of representing Barbados, but have had the opportunity to go overseas on scholarships. And some of them have also plied their trade in Scotland and other places. So I think it is too much of a value added for young people, for sports, for youth development, to say that we cannot continue to look at mechanisms to develop the sports program. And that's what I intend to do. I don't think, in fact, I know that the Barbados Defence Force cannot bear the burden all on its own. So we're actually looking to have discussions with the sporting organizations to see how best we can make the continuation of the sports program a reality.
And given that so many athletes have been successful after passing through the BDF sports program, what do you think is the secret to that program in producing top athletes?
Well, they have an opportunity to focus on their particular discipline. So whether it's cricket, whether it's football, whether it is table tennis, boxing, and the fact that we have specialized coaches, we have the time dedicated to that particular sporting discipline, as well as we look to develop them educationally and socially. Quite a few of them have come through the program, have gone on to get associate's degrees, first degrees. I would have mentioned earlier the opportunities to go overseas on scholarships, professional scholarships. So I think it is not only developing the sport, but also developing the individuals, developing them socially, their social skills. And I think as a package, and the focus not only, as I said, on the sport, but also on developing the individual, makes them a better product at the end.
You would have joined the BDF back in 1984.
That long ago?
So 38 years ago, sir. I'm not aging you. And you spent a significant portion of your career in the Barbados Coast Guard. Let's focus a bit on maritime security. How big of an issue is it for Barbados?
Let me give you a little context. The maritime area of responsibility for Barbados is 434 times the terrestrial space. Barbados imports a significant amount of its commodities. Tourism is fairly dependent on the maritime space. So the point I'm making here is that within the context of maritime security, and if you ally that to the blue economy, the reality is that we have a responsibility to protect the maritime space, protect the maritime domain. I haven't even touched on fishing and the other matters that include the blue economy. It would be unwise for us not to focus on maritime security. We have challenges, yes, but our challenges come from outside of Barbados. Those challenges I'm referring to specifically are drugs, guns. There's a possibility or potential of illicit trafficking in commodities as well. So the Barbados Coast Guard, I think there's no question as to whether or not we should have a Coast Guard. I think we have to look and see how the Coast Guard fits into the overall border security architecture, and the importance of collaborating with immigration, collaborating with customs, collaborating with the Barbados Police Service, in order to ensure that if we look at security in a layered way, that if we can stop illicit traffic or illicit cargo from coming into Barbados before it comes into Barbados, then we are dealing with the problem before it reaches our shores. And the reality is that it's not only the dealing with the illicit trafficking of drugs and weapons, but we need to be able to protect living and non-living resources. So that our fishing industry is a huge industry. We have to make sure our fishermen are capable. We have to make sure that the boats that are out there are safe and secure. Barbados Coast Guard has got to be able to respond to search and rescue. So that relationship then with the fishing industry is one that we need to continuously train, because fishermen might be able to fish, but we've got to make sure that they can navigate. We've got to make sure that working in conjunction with fisheries, that the phytosanitary conditions of the fish are being maintained, because if we're going to export our fish, we have to make sure that they meet the international standard. So let's say, for example, the Coast Guard is going to do a fishing vessel inspection. Does it have all its life-saving equipment? Does it have icebox intact? Does it have all its gear intact? Does it the necessary cooling standards that ensure the same phytosanitary standards that I'm speaking about, they're maintained to make sure that the catch, when it comes back here, is suitable for human consumption. So our partnership, therefore, then with the Fisheries Division of the Ministry of Agriculture is very, very important. So I say all of that to say that my time in the Barbados Coast Guard, I think you would realize that the Coast Guard has expanded from 2007 onwards with a new base, new vessels, an investment in more human resource. And that is to treat to the demands of patrolling the maritime domain. And I think we have to take that too in context of a recently developed maritime security strategy that Barbados has gone through with the regional security system. And that focused on building those partnerships in order to ensure that the blue economy is there for generations to come.
You mentioned challenges, but I want to dwell on that for just a bit. In terms of the criminal element, is the Coast Guard in a position to keep up with what is happening?
I would have to question if not only the Coast Guard, but if any of the security forces are able to keep up. Here's the truth. You have a criminal element that has, I wouldn't say a bottomless, but a significant amount of funds available to them. Their tactics, techniques, and procedures change on a daily basis. We have to be able to share experiences. We have to be able to share resources. We have to be able to share best practices in dealing with that criminal element. We're in a good place in Barbados, in my view, in terms of the collaboration between the security forces. Can we do better? Of course. Of course we can do better. Of course we don't have all the information, all the intelligence, but I believe if we continue to work together as we are currently doing, that we will deal with those bad guys, with those bad actors. But as I said, the collaboration is key, the communication is key. I'll make the point again, I don't think that we're in a bad place, but can we do better? Of course, because nothing is 100% perfect.
And the Coast Guard also engages in rescues at sea. If you could take me through what would happen in a case like that.
Well, a typical rescue would come in first with a distress call, which would be either from the vessel itself or from a vessel in the area or from maybe the boat owner or family to say, well, a fishing vessel has been overdue for X time, or the vessel may call in to say it has engine problems. That is processed in the Coast Guard operations room. They would then track the vessel to see where it is. Depending on the distance away from shore, if it is, I suppose, more than 12, 15 miles, they may deploy one of the larger offshore patrol vessels. And it could be from anything like a loose shaft, broken engine overheating, stuff like that. Once the last known position of the vessel is plotted, hopefully we have communications with it. The rescue vessel will deploy and bring the vessel back in. I think the success rate of the Barbados Coast Guard has been very, very, very good. I don't think they've lost a case in many years. So I should invite you to come and go on a search and rescue one of these days. You may find it very interesting.
I would love to, but I have motion sickness, so I'd have to decline your offer, sir. But let's look at the Barbados Regiment, which is the land-based arm of the BDF. Let's focus on the purpose of the regiment.
So the regiment, they work very closely with the Barbados Police Service. But let me focus firstly on what I consider to be more value added. I'm not saying that the collaboration with the Barbados Police Service is not value added. I'll speak a little bit about that later. But within the Barbados Regiment, we've got the medical unit, which I think is a real force multiplier for the government of Barbados. In fact, COVID-19 really brought that to reality in terms of swabbing, testing, the vaccine program, the patient collection cell, the working with the emergency operations center. Those are some of the duties that mostly the men and women from the Barbados Regiment would have performed. We do have several joint operations with the Barbados Police Service. Operation Scarecrow, which is an operation that targets pre-deal larceny. We do that on a nightly basis, as I said, in collaboration with the with Barbados Police Service. Sorry. There are some other land operations that we do. Broadsword, Guardian. These are operations that will deal with general lawlessness because of the deterrent value. We would pass through some of the bad areas just to make sure that people are aware that there's still security presence. At the height of the tourist season, we do anti-harassment patrols, again in conjunction with the Barbados Police Service. Apart from medical, one thing I would mention about medical, which we have to build back up that capacity, and that is the hyperbaric chamber. We have one of the few hyperbaric chambers within the region, and as you may have may not been told, the hyperbaric chamber can be used to treat several things like carbon monoxide poisoning, burns, death sickness or decompression sickness.
Yeah.
If you have diabetic ulcers, if you have wounds that are very difficult to heal, the infusion of oxygen, and I'm not going to tread too much into the medical field, but the infusion of oxygen, I've been advised, helps to speedily assist in the recovery from such injuries. Our hyperbaric chamber has been out for a few months. We're in the process of getting 2 new compressors. We have to get our medical people, get those skills back up, but I'm very, very confident that the hyperbaric chamber will be up and running before the end of this year again. Because again, I see that as value added. What we're also looking at in the Barbados Defence Force is to build out the medical capacity to assist the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. We've demonstrated that capability as a consequence of COVID. Allied to that, we have the field medical team, which is the field hospital that was generously donated by the government of the United States. That is, again, value added in terms of post-disaster. Elements of that would have deployed after Hurricane Elsa here in Barbados, as well as in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And it is a regional asset. In fact, next month, we're going to actually be doing some training for our partners in the region. But what that can do is value added again for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, but also in the event that the hospital has been impacted, we're able to deploy the field medical hospital and set up to do minor surgeries.
What was the impact of COVID-19, since you mentioned COVID-19 just now, on the men and women of the BDF?
Well, it was tough. It was tough from the standpoint of having to not only take care of yourself, but for the military, it's not a question of if you deploy. So for the average civilian, they can stay at home. But for the military, regardless of the situation, you have to deploy. So when the government said to us, look, we want you to do swabbing, testing, partner to do the vaccine rollout, work with the Ministry of Health and the Emergency Operations Center. Those individuals then would have to protect themselves while going out there to carry out their regular duties. And it was tough. It was tough. It was a tough time for the Barbados Defence Force. But I think also it was a good learning experience, and it showed us what we can do in relating to a pandemic. And I dare say it showed us some gaps that we have to fill. In the area of public health nursing, that it was not an area that we would have considered as a specialist skill within the medical architecture that we have in the Barbados Defence Force. So that is a capacity that we will build out going forward. There's monkeypox now. I'm saying monkeypox because I think we are more aware of the potential of pandemics and the whole challenges related to zoonotic diseases. I remember our planning for Ebola, but Ebola did not come to the region. But the point I'm making here is that we now have to look and make an assessment of what could be coming down the pipeline and fashion or shape ourselves to be able to respond in support to the Ministry of Health and the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. So COVID-19, as I said, was tough, but it demonstrated value added from the Barbados Defence Force. And I think going forward, the whole question of what the Barbados Defence Force can do in terms of a response to a medical emergency, we have to give that some more thought and plan for it. Of course, we still have the mass casualty care unit that we have in case there's a mass casualty. That too needs to be expanded because I believe that is not only a unit for Barbados. I think that is an exportable unit. The concept is one that can be exported, but in the event that there is a need to support that type of operation post-disaster, that unit is available to deploy as well.
And speaking of disasters, the BDF is involved in several humanitarian missions. But let's stick at home for a minute and look at what happens in preparation for a hurricane, for instance.
Interesting you should say that because just last week we would have gone through our what we call Operation Cyclone Strike, which is our preparedness exercise in response to if anything should happen in Barbados. And it started last Wednesday and finished on Sunday. We do have some gaps. We have some bits, some pieces of equipment that we need to repair and fix. And we do that every year. Not only putting up shutters and breaking out the equipment, but actually getting out there and doing our drills and exercises in the region, in Barbados, sorry, in the community. One of the things that we have been tasked on quite recently by the Minister of Home Affairs and Information is that we need to do a little bit more engagement in consultation with them, a bit more engagement in community disaster preparedness. So we're in the process now of developing it, but we're actually going to get into the communities and teach the basics, securing your home, looking for the vulnerable people within the community, making sure that you know how to operate a chainsaw, make sure you know how to report damage and so on. Because the community really is the basis for disaster response. So that if the communities are strong, then the parishes are strong, then nationally we're strong. Knock on wood, hopefully we won't have anything, by way of a severe or significant weather system that impacts on Barbados. But our motto is to be prepared and to be ready for anything that comes down the pipe.
Okay, so I think we're ready for a break now, Commodore. We'll just take a short break here. Stay with us. You're watching One on One.
Let me begin preparations. It's hurricane season. Let me sit down and reason. Let me secure a nation. Know your shelters, Bajan. Help out one another against vibration. Develop emergency community plans so that we could function. Remove outdoor objects. Make sure that you went to the ATM. Stock up with water. Make sure you clean the guttering lot. What about canned food? Make sure you got some stock up in your room. Make sure you prop up the paling and tie down the roof. Let me start to prepare real soon. Let me begin preparations. It's hurricane season. Let me sit down and reason. Let me secure a nation. Know your shelters, Bajan. Help out one another against vibration. Develop emergency community plans so that we could function. Keep it clean, keep it green.
Barbadians, we invite you to get involved and play your part as we clean and green Barbados. Come into your community with media launches, bulk waste collection exercises, community engagement sessions, and giveaways. Get on board. Let's keep Barbados clean and green.
Beautiful, beautiful Barbados.
Everything comes at a cost. And these days, no one profits from the loss, like when a child is forced to trade school day socialization for screen time study, when a disease decides to disrupt our daily routine, and suddenly every one of us is coming undone, losing loved ones' lives and livelihoods, breath and breadwinners, families and festivals and freedoms. God, we feel like it's too much hassle to be human. We will always remember the years the earth spun quieter, but Mother Nature showed us how the simple act of standing still can wage war on an illness. So may we remember how to be our own army, how it takes cooperation for a community to build immunity, how unity can nurse us back to normalcy. Why stop at one family when we could save all?
Hi, I'm Dr. Adana Grandison, and I'm here to give you a few tips on how to accurately and safely take your blood pressure readings at home. Before taking your measurement, sit in a calm, warm environment. Don't perform any exercise in the preceding 1 hour. No coffee, food, smoking, or even sinus medication in the preceding hour to taking that blood pressure reading. Empty your bladder and bowel. Most readings that are taken at home should be below or at 135 on 85 millimeters of mercury for uncomplicated hypertension. Lower home blood pressure targets might be advisable in persons who have the following conditions: diabetes, chronic renal disease, or coronary heart disease. If several readings are above 140 on 90 millimeters of mercury, make an appointment with your physician immediately. Ensure to take your readings at the same time every day. We advise 2 readings in the morning and 2 readings in the evening, initially to profile yourself, taken 1 to 2 minutes apart. However, once you have established a baseline, you can choose a time suitable to your schedule where you can monitor your blood pressure readings.
Welcome back. Commodore, just before the break, we were talking about your assistance re-hurricane season, etc. Let's look at humanitarian missions. We know the BDF is heavily involved in several missions across the region. You would have gone into St. Vincent and the Grenadines following the eruption in La Soufrière. You would have gone into several islands after they had been impacted by weather systems. What kind of pressure does that put on the BDF to maintain its presence at home after deploying several officers?
Well, it's a challenge, but I think if the need for cooperation, the need for support across the region is fundamental to what we do. Barbados is within the sub-region a leader, and in terms of HADR, humanitarian assistance and disaster response, and for us it is something that we are prepared to do. As you quite rightly mentioned, we would have deployed to several jurisdictions after severe weather systems, and it's something that we are prepared for. Knock on wood, and thankfully, if Barbados is not impacted, then it's not really a challenge. But if you look at ELSA, Barbados was impacted by ELSA, but we also would have deployed to St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And it's something that we are prepared for. It is something that we are prepared for. But soldiering is not easy. Soldiering is not an 8 to 4 job.
No,
soldiering is a 24/7 job. And the men and women of the Barbados Defence Force are committed to supporting not only the government and people of Barbados, but the region. And I thank them dearly for their commitment to duty. So the impact, thankfully, is not as big, but we do prepare for it.
And as you're talking about support for our regional brothers and sisters, you're the executive director of the regional security system. Let's look at the work of the RSS and how important it is to have partners across the region.
The motto of the regional security system is strength through unity. And essentially, the collective security arrangement is one of mutual cooperation. So basically, if there's a problem in member state A, the other member states are duty bound to come to the assistance of that member state. It may be a security incident, like a prison break, or an operation we did in St. Kitts in the latter part of 2016. Or it may be a humanitarian assistance disaster response type deployment. But fundamentally, it is a collective security arrangement that we agree to assist one another. Coincidentally, we'll be celebrating our 40th anniversary in October this year, having been established in 1982 on the 25th of October. But the importance, and Barbados is one of the original signatories, the importance of Barbados to the regional security system can't be underscored. We bring, the headquarters is here, but we bring a significant capacity by way of the police force, police service, the Barbados Defence Force. And as a leader in the RSS, again, that is something that we factor in and that we plan for. And as a collective security arrangement, the RSS is unequaled in the world. Some people have called it a mini NATO, but I think our depth of cooperation is far more significant than NATO. And when you add the value now of the field medical facility, I think that is more value added in terms of what the RSS can do.
Earlier you mentioned the close relationship that you have with the Barbados Police Service. Is there room for greater cooperation?
There's always room for improvement. There's always room for improvement. I look forward to the day where we have a joint operations center in Barbados. And I say that as an architecture that can bring economies of scale to planning and executing operations. And for a facility that is constantly stood up, that you don't have to stand it up as required. And that joint operations center can not only treat to security issues, but it could also treat to disaster response issues, where then the government can come, or whoever is representing the government, the Prime Minister, the Attorney General, Minister of Home Affairs, can come to that central location and get their briefing on whatever scenario, whether it's a security scenario, a disaster scenario. I think that's the way to go. And that ideally would be one of the first examples of a closer cooperation. And this would not be specifically to the Barbados Police Service, because I think you should have elements in there of Customs and Excise, the Immigration Department as well. If necessary, you can bring in the Barbados Prison Service, if necessary, if it's an immigration matter. But we in Barbados need to further develop and cement that concept of cooperation and collaboration across the security forces. I'm very, very keen and firm on that.
Over the years, the Barbados Police Service has suffered from a shortage of officers. Does the BDF have the same problem?
Well, our numbers are down. I think one of the challenges is that policing and military service may not seem attractive to some of our young people. Perhaps it is time to start looking outside of Barbados. I don't know, that is a discussion that I suppose we may need to have and have very, very soon. The BDF is looking for a few good men and a few good women, of course. In fact, we had a recruiting batch last year, and I believe that passed out about 40 persons. This year, we're going to have another batch of about 60 or so, or maybe 70, I think my staff told me. But that is not going to fill all of our numbers. We actually are looking, after this recruiting batch, probably for another 50. There are several opportunities within the military. We would have spoken about medical, we would have spoken about the chefs and the cooks and so on, Coast Guard, I mean, you can be an artisan. I think one of the things that we've perhaps sold ourselves short is how do we make military, how do we make policing, how do we make those jobs attractive to our young people. Quite a few of our last recruiting batch came from the youth service or the youth advanced corps. Some of them were ex-cadets as well. So that also is an area that I think we can work with our young people to introduce them to a life of a career of service, whether within the military, whether within the police. But we also need to go back to the table and make our jobs a little bit more interesting. I think we have to market ourselves a little bit more. I think that's perhaps where we are falling short.
Is discipline an issue within the various arms of the BDF?
Discipline is one of the 8 core values of the Barbados Defense Force. As far as I'm concerned, discipline is non-negotiable. It's the foundation principle and it's the basis upon, or the bedrock upon which any military organization exists. Currently, we don't have any discipline issues. But I will tell you this, the way to deal with discipline issues within the military is swift and sure. Because you cannot have an organization that prides itself on discipline, and then there are challenges within the organization. And as I said, it is one of the 8 core values of the Barbados Defense Force. And as far as I'm concerned, and any leader will tell you this, that discipline is not a matter that can be negotiated.
Well, as Chief of Staff, how do you respond to persons who might say that members of the BDF are not visible enough?
I would find that strange or hard to accept. I think we are visible. Perhaps we can do better, though, is what I would add. But then I have to ask the question, what is the requirement for us to be visible? So, according to the Defense Act, we have a fundamental responsibility for external threats to Barbados. When a lot of people are sleeping, the Barbados Defense Force is on the road or at sea. I would have made a reference to the operations that we do in conjunction with the Barbados Police Service. 7 days a week, there's a Barbados Coast Guard vessel at sea patrolling, whether it's a small boat or whether it's one of the OPVs. I think we can do more in terms of medical, and I will say that. I think we can do more in terms of youth development. But I would disagree with those individuals who say that the Barbados Defense Force is not visible. I think we have to fashion ourselves now to see what is there more for value added. Because people have questioned if there's a need for a Barbados Defense Force. I would say to them that whenever they ask whenever there's a crisis in Barbados, who are they going to call? They call the Barbados Defense Force. When the government wanted the care packages delivered, it was the Barbados Defense Force. When there was a requirement to assist in setting up the Emergency Operations Center in conjunction with the Ministry of Health, it's the Barbados Defense Force. When they want to set up a quarantine center, it's the Barbados Defense Force. Now, I'm not blowing the trumpet of the Barbados Defense Force, but what I am saying is that the Barbados Defense Force is a disciplined source of manpower that will go above and beyond the normal 8 to 4. And that's what we train for, that's what we prepare for. So I would disagree that we are not visible, but what I would say to you, what I would suggest is that perhaps there are things that we can do more. And those two particular areas for me are within the medical field, because I think we can really bring some more value added to that, and with youth development, because again, I have to make the point that the youth are our future. The future doesn't lie with me. The future lies with those 15, 16, 17-year-olds. How do we get them to see their worth and to see themselves as productive citizens of Barbados? How do we get them to identify a career early? How do we get them to get them off the block? Get them to be part of society. I'm not saying that block life is bad, but I'm saying that we have to create an environment where our young people can be more focused, where they see a future, where they can see themselves being productive citizens. And that is where I think the Barbados Defence Force, not only through the Cadet Corps, I didn't mention it before, but we're actually looking to forge a much stronger relationship with the Barbados Youth Advanced Corps, because I think, again, that is an important medium to be able to influence young people and to get them focused a little bit earlier in their lives.
Earlier you mentioned making the BDF more attractive, but we also know, as you just stated, you go beyond the 8 to 4. The exceptionally long hours that your officers work, perhaps that's a deterrent.
I don't think I'll agree with you that it's a deterrent. I think if you've signed up to join the Barbados Defence Force, you signed up to a way of life. I think the opportunities for personal and professional development that are presented by the Barbados Defence Force, that is a message that we need to communicate. I think individuals can come and do a full service of 25 years and then leave the BDF and go and be a nurse, having qualified as a nurse in the Barbados Defence Force, or as a carpenter, or as a diver, or as a welder, electrician. I mean, I can go on, a dental technician. The point I'm making is that many are called, but few may be chosen, and people may not necessarily spend their entire life in the Barbados Defence Force. In fact, I don't think that that is right. I think the Barbados Defence Force has got to see that it can contribute to Barbadian society by individuals coming, joining the organization, getting a skill, and then at the appropriate time, whatever time, at their choosing, that they can leave and then go and continue, you know, in civilian street. And that is how I see it. Yes, it's tough, and I agree. I agree it's tough. I myself remember being at sea 7-10 days, you know, and coming home after that, and then maybe 2-3 days you're out again. That is the nature of the life. But it's not always like that. And you feel a sense of satisfaction at the end of it. You know, if you go on a search and rescue and you bring in one fishing vessel, and by the time you've deposited that fishing vessel, you have to go again. Or the chaps out in the bush who are watching for a drug landing, who are keeping their quiet for, you know, a couple days, rainfall, sunshine. That's a special calling.
But how do you avoid burnout for the men and women of the force?
Well, we are very conscious of the physical and mental demands. We have a fairly robust welfare setup that consists of psychiatrists, psychologists, padres or priests that can cater to individuals' psychosocial needs as well as to their pastoral care. That is important because we ask people to go above and beyond, and we're very cognizant of the need to address those particular needs. From time to time as well, you know, we have to plan. We're not oblivious to the needs of an individual. So from time to time, people, of course, have got to get vacation leave. We have to have a little downtime. We plan some social events, and that's how we treat it. The subordinate leaders are encouraged to engage with their leaders, with their subordinates as well, and to look and identify where there may be a potential challenge, where somebody has burnout. And also an individual, male or female, has the right to go and speak with any one of the priests, any one of the psychiatrists, the psychologists, if that individual is feeling burnt out. And then it will be treated in terms of the recommendations that come from either the pastoral team or the psychosocial team.
And I know that you made the pitch that not the pitch, but that the BDF is extremely important. You mentioned vacation, and I recently discovered that vacation is actually privileged leave, because at any point in time you can be called back.
Yes, it is. It is. That's how we term it, as privileged leave, but you would only be called back if there's an emergency. So, for example, if within the next 3 days that we hear that there's a system coming, then obviously we would have to recall those persons, because the BDF, if we are always 24 hours in advance of what's happening nationally. And again, there's not a question of if, but you must, turn. I can't tell the Prime Minister I'm not coming. I have to be here, and that's the commitment, and that is what I think people join the military for. It is that selfless service, is that commitment to duty, and it is understanding that there is a nation that is depending on you as an individual to come and play your part. Because after the system is gone, then we need to get back Barbados up and running as quickly as possible. That is part and parcel of what the Defence Force is about as well. So yes, it is privileged leave, and it's highly unlikely that you will be called back. It has to be an emergency.
Commodore, you have already outlined the benefits, not only to Barbadians, but to visitors to our island as well, in terms of the commitment of the Barbados Defence Force and where it stands when it comes to security. Throughout the course of the program, you would have outlined what you would like to see. But in a nutshell, I want you to tell me, what is your vision as Chief of Staff?
My vision for the force is quite simple. I think we need to look at our people. We need to invest in our people. And a military organization has as its very core our people. The Defence Force of the future, looking back at where we have come from, has got to be better shaped, better equipped, better trained to respond to not current threats only, but also emerging threats. We can only do so through our people. And I've said to the staff here to look at a very intensive developmental program for our staff, whether it is the artisans, the medical engineers at the Coast Guard, because something goes wrong in Barbados, we've got to be able to respond. And again, I make the point, it's not a question of if, but when. And I think some of our skill sets over the years, we are not at the level that we've lost some of those skill sets. So
could you explain those skill sets?
Okay, so a lot of people don't know, but the Barbados Defence Force would have constructed what is District A Police Station. Barbados Defence Force would have constructed Paragon Base. Some of those skill sets are not resident in the force now, so we have to build back out those skill sets. Whether you're mason, carpenter, electrician, surveyor, you name it. That can be used as part of nation building. I'm not only talking post-disaster, I'm talking, and I mentioned this again before I go on, the geriatric hospital there. We've done some work there a couple of years ago. So we need to build back out that. Those skill sets, I can articulate this now. Perhaps we need to have that kind of relationship with the skills training or vocational board, I think it's called, so that we can get some young people school leavers join the military, and that can be the start of their particular skill or expertise, that their particular trade. The point I'm making is I see the BDF investing in its people in order to contribute to Barbados, not only now but going forward. The other terms of strategy has to do with the physical plant of the Barbados Defence Force. I think we live, and I say live, we occupy here at St. Anne's Fort a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Some of our buildings are in a state of disrepair, and we need to work on the physical plant and ensure that our soldiers and our sailors, when they're here during a hurricane, for example, that they're safe. Because if they're unsafe, then they become part of the problem. So we need to look at the physical plant. And then the last one I would suggest has to do with how we position the Barbados Defence Force in terms of value added to Barbados and to the region. And it goes back to the point I made earlier in terms of medical and youth development, because I think that those are two fundamental areas that the Barbados Defence Force can be value added to the government and people of Barbados.
So I'm at home watching this program. You keep talking about youth development past the age of 35, but I still have a lot to give in terms of adding to those skills that you said the force would have lost over the years. How can I contribute?
So the over 35 are actually our specialist skills, and I would also mention to you that we have a small cyber unit. The information space that we live in today is a challenge. And the compromised networks that you would have heard of in other sections of the media is the reality that we live in. What we in the Barbados Defence Force are doing is engaging those specialists. We've set up a small cyber unit with the intent of being able to assist the government of Barbados to treat the matters of cybersecurity. And they're going to be working in conjunction with the Ministry of Information Science and Technology. But those specialist skills, there's room for those individuals to be part of the reserve. I think a lot of people only see the Barbados Defence Force as the full-time element, but there is a huge potential for part-time and huge potential for specialist skills. And that is where we, when I've asked about a few good men and women, maybe I should have expanded my request to the people of Barbados to say that we're looking for some people to join the reserve as well. Because, as I say, part of the remit of the Barbados Defence Force is nation building. And an individual, male or female, can come and assist with some weekend work, bring in their mason skills, bring in their carpentry skills, electrical skills. Let's say we're looking after a home for one of our legionnaires. We can do some work on the weekends. And actually, we have more room, more demand in the reserve than actually in the regular element. So I'm glad you touched on this, because for me that too is another area of the 3 Ps that I would have mentioned, the people, and we need really to build out the reserve. We are going to be doing a specific campaign, a specific drive for selective recruiting for artisans within the reserve.
And sir, I thank you very much for taking the time out to talk to us. We know that you have an exceptionally busy schedule, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you. It was a pleasure having the opportunity to chat a little bit about the Barbados Defence.
And I learned quite a bit, so I thank you very much as well.
You're most welcome.
That was the Chief of Staff of the Barbados Defence Force, Commodore Errington Shurland. I'm Lisa Lord. You are watching One on One. Have yourself a wonderful evening.